Hello there. Let's discuss UPSC CSAT 2023 comprehension questions. We'll discuss Series A. I'll suggest you to pause and attempt each question as we discuss. I'll try to make this video as small as possible. Let's get started. Okay, passage 1. Try this. I hope you would have done this. Question 1. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most rational, practical, and immediate action required to ensure fair and equitable allocation of water to different stakeholders? They've given us 4 options. Those may look like practical actions, but we have to pick the best one. Going about eliminating wrong options, I would easily eliminate option D. To mitigate water crisis, water demand of sectors such as agriculture and industry should be reduced. No way that is an option. No way that is a practical action. Okay, and anyway, that's an option because they have to be giving us 4 options. That's why option D, easy elimination. Look at option B. All river systems of the country should be linked and huge aquifers created. Now that's too extreme. All river systems should be linked. That's too extreme. So B is also an easy elimination. So out of 4 options, 2 options are easily eliminated. You have to pick between A and C. Look at option C. Water channels between regions of water surplus, regions of water deficit should be created. That doesn't look like the most rational, practical, immediate action required to ensure fair and equitable allocation of water to different stakeholders. That is not a practical solution indeed. But option A, if you can read the stretch of this passage, as you can see, we often hear about conflicts among different states in India over river waters. Now that's something happening often, frequently happening. Of the 20 major river systems, 14 are already water stressed. So 14 out of 20. Now that's quite a huge number. 75% of the population lives in water stressed regions, a third of whom live in water scarce areas. Now that's quite a lot. That's a huge chunk of the population. That's happening often, and that's happening to quite a chunk of the population. And now that's something that should be contemplated very seriously. According to the Constitution of India, what is state sufficient? The passage goes on, and this etc. is very critical. Now, all this would need option A. If these things should happen, option A is the practical solution, that a national, pragmatic, legal, and policy framework of water allocation should be made. So that's why option A is my answer. I hope that's clear. Okay, passage 2. Please try this. Which one of the following statements best reflects what is implied by the passage? Now, this is about implication from the passage. Implication is not something like a central theme that you would be directly picking from the passage, but it's something that you can assume from the passage, something this passage would want to convey within itself. Option A. Education system must be strengthened in rural areas. Now, when I read this, I could read nothing about education system or education. So this is an easy elimination. Option A is an easy elimination. Option B, large scale and effective implementation of skill development program is the need of the hour. Wow, that's a good statement, but not something that's implied from this passage. Skill development, that is not mentioned here. That's totally out of context. Now look at this. Another option that is easily eliminated. Option C, for economic development, health and nutrition of only skilled workers. Now, very specific to only skilled workers. Now, that is not what this passage mentioned. Needs special attention. It's not about caring only for skilled workers or their health for economic development of the country. Now, that's too extreme. Now, these 3 options are given because there need to be 4 options in a comprehension question. That is why. And these are easy eliminations. Now, option D is right because A, B, C are wrong. And option D is right because option D is right. For rapid economic growth as envisaged by us, attention should be, okay, there's an extreme word should, but no harm, should be paid to health and nutrition of the people. Yes, as I can read this, more than half of Indian women and almost a quarter of Indian men, that's again a big part of the population. Now this anemia, tuberculosis, they're all given us tools, examples to exemplify some issue related to health. And it is one that really should be addressed given India's demographic outlook. Now, what is that should be addressed? That's seriously related to health, and only health in this passage at least. So option D is my answer. For rapid economic growth as envisaged by us, So what we have a vision regarding rapid economic growth, attention should be paid to health and nutrition of the people. And regarding nutrition too, it is very clearly mentioned here. I hope this is clear. It's an easy passage. Okay, passage 3. I hope you would have done this. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational message conveyed by the author? Message. And a message has to be a message. Now, the keyword is message, and we have to be picking an option that sounds like a message from these 4 options. Option A. Adaptation to climate change and mitigation response are basically the responsibility of the government. Responsibility of the government? Did the passage say that? No way. The passage never said that. In fact, it's all said as responsibility of the farmers, their perception. So that is easily eliminated. Option B, climate change causes a change in government policies regarding land use patterns in the country. Number one, that is not a message. That may sound like a concern. That may be a fact, may not be a fact, but that is not anyway mentioned here. Now, read this. Climate change causes a change in government policies regarding land use patterns in the country. Is there something mentioned like this in the passage? No way mentioned. So that's easily eliminated again. Option C, risk perceptions of farmers are important for motivating them for taking adaptation decisions. I have read that actually from this passage. In fact, the passage would want to give me that message. I'm taking home that message after reading this passage. That's what I feel. So option C is my answer. But let me reaffirm option D. I can just straight away bubble option C right now. Option D, since mitigation is not possible, since who said that? Government should come up with policies for quick response to climate change. So this is not about government responding to climate change. And this is not, nowhere the passage said that mitigation is not possible. That's too extreme. Option C is my answer, and rightly so. If I could read this passage, there's one thing regarding climate change. Then second thing is regarding adaptation to climate change, which is paramount alongside fast mitigation response. And not just that, the passage clearly mentioned, another solution is to have a planned or policy-driven adaptation, which would require the government to come up with policy recommendations. That's they mentioned. Perception is a necessary prerequisite for adaptation. And whose perception? Farmer perceives. So it's important how a farmer perceives. So that is where the passage is trying to give us a message. So option C is my answer. I hope that's clear. Read this passage to answer question 11. Question 11. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crucial message conveyed by the author of the passage? Again, the keyword message. What could be the difference between the keyword message and implication? To imply or implication would mean what you may assume from the passage. Message is something the author would want to give you through the passage, something the reader would take home as a message from the author. Now that had to be a message. Option A, business that cause emissions may need to close down or pay for pollution in future. Now this may look like a helping word for me to pick option A as my answer. But option A is not a message from this passage. Definitely, it can be a concern, but not a message. And a message not at all from this passage. May need to close down or pay for pollution. That's not mentioned here. Option B, the only solution is technological development related to issues of climate change. The only solution. Now that's too extreme. The only solution is technological development. That's not mentioned as such. Technological change is mentioned, but in a very good context, but not option B. That is not the message from this passage. Option C, waiting to deal with carbon emissions until technology improves is not a wise strategy. Now that sounds like a message the passage would want to give me, but let me read further. Let me reaffirm, or let me read option D. Since future technological change is uncertain, who said that? This passage or the author never said that. If you have read that somewhere else, that's your problem. Okay, that is not mentioned here. That's too wide. Okay, beyond the context of the passage, new industries should be based on renewable energy sources. Now, that's not at all related to this passage. That's an easy elimination. And option C is my answer. Now, if we can read this passage again, we can see the connect. Technological change, meanwhile, could make a future transition away from fossil fuels cheap, or it. Now, what is this it? This it is technological change. That's the connect. It might not, or it might not, leaving the world with a terrible choice between sharply reducing emissions, carbon emissions at huge cost, or suffering through the effects of unabated warming. So that's the message, option C, the passage would want to give me. When you deal with carbon emissions, until technology improves is not a wise strategy. Message may not be directly mentioned as such, but that's something that you will take home from the passage. So option C is my answer, no doubt. Okay, read this passage to answer question 12. Question 12. Which one of the following statements best implies the most rational assumption that can be made from the passage? Implications, assumptions. This would mean what you may assume from the passage. Option A. We are likely to spend more money on cure than prevention. This word likely seems to be a word that may help us to pick this as a right option. But we have a very serious issue with this part of this option, to spend more money on cure than prevention. That is nowhere mentioned in this passage. Easy elimination. Option B. It is the job of the government to solve our environmental and public health problems. Government is having many jobs, but nowhere in this passage is mentioned that it is the job of the government to solve our environmental and public health problems. That's an easy elimination. Another option typed because an option has to be typed. Easy elimination. Option C. Health can be protected even if environmental problems go on unattended. Now, this may not sound good, this part, even if environmental problems go on unattended. But health can be protected. Can be is a helping word. Let me read option D, because there can be a fight between option C and D. So let me reaffirm, and D should be read for sure. Loss of traditional lifestyle and influence of Western values led to some unhealthy ways of living. Western values, traditional lifestyles. I must say there is no fight between option C and D, because option D is an easy elimination. Option C is an answer. Option C is the answer because, if you can read from this part, with environmental problems, individual efforts can be perceived as having negligible effect. But with health, on the other hand, individual choices can make the difference between life and death. Option C, health can be protected even if environmental problems go on, and it's something that we can assume from this passage. Okay, read this passage to answer question 13. Question 13. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the passage? The crux of the passage. That's the keyword. Crux would mean central theme, the main idea, the thread around which the passage revolves. That's crux of the passage. Option A. The scheme of universal basic income should be implemented worldwide as way of poverty alleviation. Worldwide. This worldwide is here, and another worldwide is there, but that worldwide is not this worldwide. This passage, if you read this passage, there are a few keywords to really take care of. And one thing is nutrition, health, diet, nutritious food, the food system, nutritional needs, healthcare system, the economic progress, which is essential for the poor to improve their lives. And it all began with this statement: many people are not eating the right food. This state option, universal basic income, is never mentioned here. And it's all about poverty elevation. Where is nutrition? Nutrition is not mentioned in option A. And please understand, nutrition is not always poverty elevation, and poverty elevation is not always nutrition. They're different. Option B, we must place food-based nutrition at the center of our policy debate. Yes, while I read this, I thought that is the crux of the passage, but let me read further. Option C, nutritional status of food should be improved by creating appropriate genetically modified crops. Now, you would have read that somewhere else, but not from this passage. Don't take option C as the crux of the passage. The author will feel sad. The author will feel bad if you take C as the crux of the passage. And author will give you, UPSC will give you negative mark. Option D is another elimination. Read this. Using modern food processing technology. Where is technology mentioned? Nowhere mentioned. We must fortify food items with required nutrient elements. That's not the crux of the passage. Author will faint if you'll take option D as the crux of the passage. Option B is the right answer. We must place food-based nutrition at the center of our policy debate. That's the crux of the passage. I hope that's clear. Read this passage to answer question 21. Question 21. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational implication conveyed by the passage? Best is a superlative, and implication would mean what you may assume from the passage. That's it. Looking at option A, arbitrary curbs on vehicles to reduce pollution are difficult to implement. Difficult to implement? Did the passage say that? No. And this passage is not about implementation of curbs, how difficult it is to implement. This passage is not that. It's something that you wouldn't imply from the passage for sure. Option B, knee-jerk reactions cannot solve the problem of pollution, but an evidence-based approach will be more effective. In usual cases, looking at previous UPSC questions, this sounds like an elimination, cannot solve, will. But let me read further. I cannot eliminate B now. I have to read further because let me check if there are further eliminations. Option C, a heavy penalty should be enforced on those driving without periodic pollution tests. That's a good suggestion, but not an implication from this passage, penalty. Someone getting penalized. No, not from this passage. A good suggestion indeed. Option D, in the absence of laws, who said? Did the passage say absence of laws? Okay, maybe in the absence of laws, they're trying to assume, let me read, in the absence of laws to deal with problems of pollution, okay, the administration tends to make arbitrary decisions. First of all, this passage never said that because it has to be an implication from the passage. This is not a message. This is an implication from the passage. And this passage has never said something that you can imply as absence of laws from this passage. No. And number two, this passage is never making us imply from this passage that the administration tends to make arbitrary decisions. Whether administration make arbitrary decisions or not, that is not an implication from this passage. Whether laws are absent or present, that is also not implication from this passage. So that is also eliminated. And option B is my answer, and rightly so. If I can read this, arbitrary, B is my answer. Arbitrary bans are unfair, very clearly said. And towards this part, we can clearly understand what is needed is the scientific and reliable information. So what is needed, what is indispensable, what is inevitable is the scientific and reliable information about the source of pollutants on a continuing basis and the technologies that will work to reduce pollution from them. Option B is my answer. Read this passage to answer question 22. Question 22. Which of the following statements best reflects the logical inference from the passage given above? Inference is a conclusion that you will arrive from this passage. That's inference. Option A, it is an important agenda of the countries around the world to ensure access to good external financing. Access to external financing is mentioned here. But that doesn't mean that we can connect that to this. That is to confuse us. First of all, there's nothing mentioned about countries around the world. And that is not the idea mentioned in the passage when they talk about access to external financing as that is given in the option. That is just to confuse. Option B, good corporate governance improves the credibility of the firms. Now that sounds like the inference or the conclusion from this passage. Let me read option C. International capital markets ensure that the firms maintain good corporate governance. International capital markets, that's totally not mentioned in this passage. Totally outside the passage. Option D, good corporate governance paves the way for a robust supply chains. Now, this is also not mentioned here. Easy eliminations, option C, option D, easy elimination. Option A can be confusing, but that is also eliminated. All right. And when we read this passage to reaffirm option B as the answer, we can be rest assured that option B is the answer indeed. As I can read from this part, effective cooperative governance enhances access to external financing by firms, leading to greater investment, higher growth, employment. These are all advantages of good corporate governance. And these advantages would actually make corporate governance credible, increase the credibility, and that credibility part is actually mentioned towards the end. How much credible these are for the investors because of these advantages. So option B is the answer. I hope that's clear. Let's attempt this passage to answer question 23. Question 23. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational inference that can be drawn from the passage? Again, the keyword is inference, the conclusion that you can infer from this passage. After reading this passage, any elephant would get goosebumps. Anyone would be so proud to think that elephants are the stars of the world. Option A. The home range of elephants needs to be a vast area of rich biodiversity. Now, that isn't mentioned like that in this passage, that the home range of elephants needs to be a vast area of rich biodiversity. In fact, on the contrary, the passage mentions that wherever elephant goes, it is bringing about a desirable positive change in biodiversity, making it rich. But that doesn't mean that the home range of elephants needs to be a vast area. Elephants, their movement, they are making the difference. So that's just to confuse you, an option like option A. Option B. Elephants are the keystone species and they benefit the biodiversity. That sounds true from this passage. What is a keystone species? Keystone species is an organism that helps to define an entire ecosystem. Without these keystone species, the ecosystem would be dramatically different or would cease to exist altogether. Now, that's the definition of a keystone species. So if we can define elephant in that category from this passage, well, this passage takes us to that level actually. So option B sounds like the right answer, but then let me read option C. Rich biodiversity cannot be maintained in the forest without the presence of ecosystem. That's too much. Without the presence of elephants, it is not mentioned in that extreme, at that extreme level. So option C is an elimination. Option D, elephants are capable of regenerating forests with species as per their requirement. Now that sounds so scary. Okay, it is not as per their requirements they do that. It is just by default that is happening, and that what is happening is very desirable. So option B is the right answer, as we can read that from the stretch of this passage altogether. This passage is all about that. So option B is my answer. Bravo. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. The key word here is assumption. Regarding the keyword assumption, we should always know there is a level beyond which we can't assume. There's also this level till which we can assume. So there is this defining level beyond which we can't assume, till which we can assume. It's very important to know that. Statement 1. Collection, processing, and segregation of municipal waste should be with government agencies. Should be, extreme word used here. From this passage, we can't assume that the passage is telling us collection, processing, and segregation of municipal waste should be with government agencies. In fact, the passage is just telling us this. In India, the segregation of municipal waste at source is rare. Recycling is mostly with the informal sector. So there's something that we can't assume that it should be with the government agencies. Now, this is regarding recycling specifically, which is with the informal sector. And here the statement is talking about collection, processing, and segregation. So that's just to confuse us. And never this passage is mentioned, it should be with government agencies. So this is something that we can't assume. So we can't assume till that level. Statement 2. Resource recovery and recycling require technological inputs that can be best handled by private sector enterprises. Now, this is also a superlative. Best is superlative. It is extreme and is not mentioned as such in this passage in such a way that we can assume from this passage. No, we can't assume that. That is something that we can't assume. So D is my answer. I hope that's clear. Question 32. This question is a sub-question of the previous passage. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the passage? Again, the keyword crux. Crux would mean the central theme, the thread around which the passage revolves, the main idea. Option A, generation of energy from municipal solid waste is inexpensive. There's nothing mentioned in this passage regarding expense, whether it is expensive or inexpensive. This is totally outside the context of the passage. That should be easily eliminated. Option B, biomethanation is the most ideal way of generating energy from municipal solid waste. Biomethanation is mentioned towards the end, as we can read. this portion, biomethanation offers a major solution for processing this. Biomethanation is mentioned as a major solution, offering a major solution, but not the most ideal way. Now, that's too extreme. And certainly that's not the crux of the passage. So because of this extreme, it's just a major solution, offering a major solution. That's it. Option C, segregation of municipal solid waste is the first step in ensuring the success of waste to energy plants. Now that sounds good. Let me read option D. The biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is not adequate. Not adequate. Who said that? Do we know that from this passage? Not really. To provide energy from waste effectively, efficiently. Now that's something outside the context of this passage that has to be eliminated. And option A, B, and D are wrong, not just because they are wrong, but there is always a right answer, that is option C. Segregation of municipal solid waste is the first step in ensuring the success of waste to energy plants. It all began from this part. In India, the segregation of municipal waste is at source is rare. Now, this is something which is rare. Now, that's a concern that is addressed by the author. Now, that has to be addressed. A concern addressed, and that need to have some solutions. So where does waste to energy fit into all this? Ideally, it fits into the chain after segregation. So that segregation as the first step is quintessential as per the passage. And that's the crux of the passage. Please read this passage to answer question 33. Question 33. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Keyword assumption. Be very careful. Assumption would mean there's a level till which you can assume, there's a level beyond which you can't assume. Let's be very careful. Statement 1. Organic farming is inherently unsafe for both farmers and consumers. Inherently unsafe. The passage never said that. In fact, the passage says there's a claim that organic farming is inherently safer and healthier. And the passage talks about the confusion amongst farmers and consumers regarding organic farming because they're still being young and not well regulated in India. And this portion of the passage is exemplifying the confusion. So organic farming is inherently unsafe is totally outside the scope of the passage that cannot be assumed. So there's that level till which you can't assume. You cannot assume that. Statement 2, farmers and consumers need to be educated about eco-friendly food. Now, we may have an issue with eco-friendly food because that's not mentioned as such in this passage, though the mention is regarding organic farming. But since the keyword is assumption, there's no harm in connecting eco-friendly food as the output of organic farming. So the connection can be there. And the keyword is assumption. That's okay. So farmers and consumers need to be educated. Of course, they need to be educated regarding eco-friendly food and, of course, regarding organic farming, because this confusion need to be eliminated through proper awareness and education. So statement 2 can be assumed from this passage. B. Question 34, it's another sub-question of the same passage. So this passage is having 3 sub-questions. It's a good news. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational, and practical message conveyed by the author of the passage? Message. Message has to be a message, and that's the keyword here. So we have to pick an option that sounds like a message. Option A. In India, organic farming should not be promoted as a substitute for conventional farming. Wow, what a message that is. Easy to be eliminated. Is that a message? No way. I don't know what goes through that person's mind while typing this as an option, because that person should know, whoever that person is, that this is an easy elimination, that we'll never take that as a message. Anyway, typed for the sake of typing an option. That's it. Option B, there are no safe organic alternatives to chemical fertilizers. Yeah, chemical fertilizers are everything in this world. So another option typed for the sake of typing an option. Easy eliminations. A eliminated, B eliminated. Now, these are statements. They cannot be taken as a message in any case. Forget about taking as a message from this passage. All right. Option C. In India, farmers need to be guided and helped to make their organic farming sustainable. Exactly, that's the message. But let me read option D. The aim of organic farming should not be to generate huge profits, as there is still no global market for its products. Yeah, this passage is talking everything about making profit, not making profit, about global market. It's all about the economic side of organic farming. That's an option that has to be eliminated, just like A, B, and D. They can never be my message, and my message is this, option C. Wow, what a message. In India, farmers need to be guided. Exactly. That's the message the author would really want to give you, the passage would really want to give you. Take that message home. Option C is your right answer, and take your 2.5 from UPSC. Let's try this passage to answer question 35. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Again, the keyword assumption. Well, this is a very easy passage because it will work on the principle of elimination. Look at statement 1. To implement the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG is not mentioned here. It's totally out of context. So 1 is eliminated, so we can easily discard option A and option D. Out of 4 options, 2 options are easily eliminated. Dependence on a few crops has negative consequence for human health and ecosystem is something that we can assume from this passage. No harm in assuming this. So I said this is eliminated. So A and D are eliminated because of statement 1's presence there. And this is something that can be assumed. Dependence on a few crops has negative consequence. Now, if you can read this, for long, the agriculture sector focused on increasing food production, particularly staples. So it's about dependence and then the negative effect of that dependence mentioned here. So that can be assumed. Statement 3, government policies regarding food planning need to incorporate nutritional security. This nutrition security is very much mentioned in this passage. Nutrition security is here, and nutrition security is here mentioned, nutrition security problem. So that is mentioned in the context. In a way, we can assume as something from the passage. So no harm in assuming 3. Look at option 4. For the present monoculture agriculture practices, farmers receive subsidies. Now, this is an easy elimination. There's nothing mentioned regarding subsidies. So 4 can be eliminated. Now, there was a fight between B and C was eliminated. C can be eliminated because of the presence of statement 4. There's nothing mentioned regarding subsidies. So statement 2 and 3 can be assumed from this passage. So B is my answer. So if you focus more on elimination, 1 can be eliminated, 4 can be eliminated. So that means we'll easily arrive at our answer. That's option B, because 1, 4, and this option D can be eliminated. A, C and D can be eliminated because of that reason. So my answer would be option B. I hope that's clear. Read this passage to answer question 41. Well, this passage and this question 41, I feel is the trickiest of all the comprehension questions from CSAT 2023. That's what I feel. With reference to the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Again, the keyword assumption. In assumption, the keyword in any case is tricky. Statement 1. Global warming is causing spring to come early and for longer durations. Can I assume this from this passage? I feel I can assume that from this passage. I guess as I can read from this side, they found that warmer winters with less snow resulted in a longer lag time between spring events and a more protracted vernal window. Now there's global warming, ice will melt. This will result in growth, and spring will come early and for longer durations. So that can be assumed. Statement 2, I feel that cannot be assumed from this passage. Look, it has to be with reference to the given passage. So whatever we assume, it has to be based on the passage. So there's a limit till which we can assume and beyond which we can't assume. So it has to be having a reference to the passage. Early spring and longer period of spring is not good for bird populations. Did the passage absolutely mention that in an absolute sense? I will say no, that can be assumed. So I feel A is my answer. Let's try this passage to answer question 42. Question 42. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational, and crucial message implied by the passage? The keyword here is message, sandesh. So we have to pick an option from these 4 options, which looks like a message, a sandesh. All right. So option A, reading option A, an enhanced efficiency of use of nitrogen is imperative which means it is necessary, it is important for both food production and environment. Now that sounds like a message. Let me read further. Option B, production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers cannot be stopped as it will adversely affect global food security. Cannot be stopped as it will. These are all extremes, red flags. And moreover, this doesn't sound like a message. That may be a concern, not a message. So right now that's fit for elimination. Let me read further. Option C, because I have to pick an option which sounds like a message. Now this option B may be a fact, may not be a fact, but may be a concern, may not be a concern, but not a message for sure. Option C, alternatives to crops that require excess of nitrogen should be identified and cultivated. That may sound like a message, but not the logical, rational, and crucial message implied by the passage for sure. It's not about alternative to crops that require excess of nitrogen. No, that's not the message, the crucial message the passage is giving us. That is also fit to be eliminated. Option D, conventional agriculture using synthetic fertilizers should be replaced with agroforestry, agro-ecosystems, and organic farmings. Why did the person waste so much time typing all this, making us read all this? That is an easy elimination because that is not mentioned here in the first place, and that is not a message at all. Now, looking at all these options and reading this passage with the confirmation that there are certain things mentioned here. A global analysis of nitrogen use efficiency. It's all about nitrogen use efficiency. A measure of the amount of nitrogen a plant takes in to grow versus what is left behind as pollution. Says that using too much fertilizers will lead to increased pollution of waterways and the air. Now they've given some statistics to exemplify the same. And the message would be option A. An enhanced efficiency, as you can read from the beginning of the passage itself, the message starts from there. An enhanced efficiency of use of nitrogen is imperative for both food production and environment, and that message is contained in the entirety of this passage, option A. And B and C and D is never a message. Okay, let's read this passage to answer question 43. Question 43. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational, and crucial message conveyed by the passage? Again, the keyword message. We have to pick an option that looks like, sounds like a message conveyed by the passage. Now, that's very important. Option A, climate justice should be ingrained in detail in the rules of all the new climate compacts agreements. Now, this sounds like that message from this passage. Let me read further. Option B, environmental resources are unevenly distributed and exploited across the globe. That is not a message. And this passage is not about environmental resources being unevenly distributed across the globe. Number one, that is not a message. Number two, that can be a concern, that may be a fact, they may not be a fact, but that is not a message from this passage, not conveyed by this passage as an easy elimination. Option C, there's an impending issue. Impending means what is going to happen in future. Impending issue of dealing with a huge number of climate change victims, climate refugees. Now, this is mentioned here regarding victims of climate change. It's mentioned in this passage, but it is not about the number of issues that are impending or number of issues that is to be dealt with. This passage is not about that. So at least that is not a message. That may be a concern. If there are more issues to be dealt with, that is a concern, not a message. Option D, climate change in all its connotations is mostly due to developed countries and therefore their share of burden should be more. Well, this is totally out of context, no way related to this passage, developed countries. Now, where does this come from? I don't know. Anyway, after eliminating option B, C, and D, A is my message, and A is my message for the right reasons. If I can say this, along with the sustainable lifestyles, climate justice. The climate justice is the key word. You see, there is no keyword climate justice in this option. Environmental resources. Where's climate justice? It is not mentioned. Climate justice, climate change. These are all the keywords here. Climate justice, climate change, justice in climate. And that is why this is the message. Option A is the right answer. Let's read this passage to answer question 51. Question 51. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational message conveyed by the passage? Again, the keyword message. Option A, food yielding trees should replace other trees in rural and tribal areas and community owned lands. Is that mentioned here? It's not mentioned here that food yielding trees should replace other trees. When this passage has got a larger premise, when this passage talks about agricultural lands, the passage talks about annual crops, crop failure, crop production gaps, agriculture, this passage is having a greater premise, not that food yielding trees should replace other trees. It's not from tree to tree. There's a larger premise, and this is definitely not a message that we get from this passage. Option B, food security cannot be ensured in India with the present practice of conventional agriculture. Food security cannot be ensured. That's a red flag. That's an extreme word there. Who said that? Did the passage say that? No way. The passage has never said that. And is that some kind of message? That cannot be a message, that food security cannot be ensured in India. Maybe if that is true, that is a concern, not a message. And definitely the passage has never said that. Option B is an easy elimination, like option A. Option C, wastelands and degraded areas in India should be converted into agroforestry. So far, so good. But let me read the sentence completely. Should be converted, should is an extreme, there's something with that, into agroforestry systems to help the poor. Now, is the passage mentioning that to helping the poor? Just because the passage is mentioned about rural and tribal communities, can we go so far assuming that that is a message from this passage? We can't do that. Wastelands and degraded areas in India should be converted to agroforestry. No, that is not a message. That is not a message given by this passage. And that to help the poor, that is not specifically mentioned as such. So what are we doing here? We have eliminated option A, B, C. So D is an easy pick, not because A, B, C are wrong. D is an easy pick. That's an answer because that is the message the passage is actually giving. Agro-ecosystems should be developed. So the word should is there, but that doesn't mean that that's an extreme word. We have to eliminate that. But that is a message essentially contained in the passage. No problem. Agro-ecosystems should be developed in addition to or along with conventional agriculture. All our keywords are matching. All our keywords. Sourcing food from non-agricultural lands in addition to agricultural lands enables a systematic approach to food consumption. And they have just elaborated all this. And it is sourcing food from non-agricultural lands. So that cycle continues. Option D is the message given by the passage. Read this passage to answer question 52. Question 52. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and practical message conveyed by the passage? Again, the keyword message. Option A, it is necessary to put proper effluent treatment protocols in place. That sounds like a message that I got from this passage. Effluent would mean waste. So it is important to put proper waste treatment protocols in place. Looks like that message I would take from this passage. But let me read further. Option B, it is necessary to promote environmental awareness among people. People. It's not about awareness among people. It's about antibiotics manufacturing companies, those pharma companies. It's not about people. It's not about the lack of environmental awareness among people. There's a good suggestion, good message, but not a message from this passage. Easy elimination. Option C, spread of drug-resistant bacteria cannot be done away with as it is inherent in modern medical care. Wow, what a good option to type and present in front of us for easy elimination. Spread of drug-resistant bacteria cannot be done away with. Now, that's extreme. It's totally not the message of this passage, totally outside the scope and context of the passage. Option D, pharma manufacturing companies should be set up in remote rural areas away from crowded towns and cities, as though this passage is all about where pharma manufacturing companies should be set. This passage is not about that. The author will cry if you take option D. Option A, UPSC will give you 2.5. That's the message given by the passage. It is necessary to put proper effluent treatment protocols in place. As you can see very clearly, the environmental impact of antibiotics manufacturing companies not treating their waste has scarcely been discussed at any length or seriousness thus far. That's actually a concern that is presented by the author in this passage, but that is given to us in the form of a message, or we'll take from the author as a message, pollution from antibiotics. So option A is my answer. I hope that's clear. Okay, take your time and read this passage to answer question 53. Question 53. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the passage? Now look at the keyword crux. Comes back again. Crux would mean the central theme, the main idea, the topic sentence, the thread around which the passage revolves. Option A. To become a global power, India needs to invest in universal quality education. Now that sounds like the crux of the passage. So far, so good. But let me read the options. Option B. India is unable to become a global power because it is not focusing on promoting knowledge economy. Now, knowledge economy is mentioned here. Global economy is mentioned here. And that is to confuse us, global power. It is totally confusing. The idea is to confuse us. Don't be confused. This passage is never mentioned. India is unable to become a global power because it is not focusing on promoting knowledge economy. That is not the crux of the passage. That may be the crux of some other passage, but definitely not this passage. Option C. Our education system should focus more on imparting skills. That's fine. During higher education, that's not fine. This passage is not about higher education. This passage, in fact, is all about importance of primary education, the foundational skills. Now read this. Benefits of quality school education. Like one learns to walk before running, similarly, one picks up advanced skills only after picking up the basic foundational skills. That's the essence of the passage. Towards the end, we can read, workforce will be our inability to keep pace with the global economy. Without a strong learning foundation at the primary level, there can be no improvement in higher education. So the focus is on not higher education, focus on primary foundational skills, not higher education. So this is eliminated. This is eliminated. Option D. Parents of many school children are illiterate and are unaware of the benefits of quality education. Who said this? Not this author for sure. Option A is my answer. To become a global power, India needs to invest in universal quality education. A is the answer because I can't take B, C, and D. And A is the crux of the passage, as I can see the essence of that in this entire passage. I hope this is clear. Question 61. I hope you would have read this passage. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical message implied by the above passage? Again, the keyword message. We have to be very careful regarding certain keywords in the passage which may guide us to pick an option. So I would want to show this passage as an example because the options may be really confusing. So let's try to find out if there are certain keywords we can get from the passage, those may guide us. For example, in this passage, the keyword is choice, decision, to make choice. The paradox of choice is illustrated by the story of Wooden's ass, to choose, choices, to decide, choices. All throughout the passage, this is consistent, making decisions more difficult. Life is about choices. Many people are overwhelmed with attractive life choices, yet find themselves unhappy and anxious. This is the crux of the passage, and that is essentially a message author would want to give us. So let's try to pick that particular message from these options. Option A. Modern technology enfeebles means weakens societal structure and makes life difficult. Now, this is not against modern technology. Of course, changes in technology is being given as an example of various choices that we may have in front of us. But that is not mentioned as a message, for sure, not as a message that modern technology weakens or enfeebles societal structure. That's an easy elimination. Option B, modern life is full of uncertainties and endless difficult choices. Whoa, what a message. Is that a message? It's a bit pessimistic. It's extremely pessimistic, not bit pessimistic. Modern life is full of uncertainties and endless difficult choices. It's not about difficult choices or uncertainties. It's something other than that the author would want to give us as a message. Option B is eliminated. Option C, we are influenced by the opinion of others and have no courage to follow our own convictions. It's not about opinion of others. This passage is never mentioned about others, any subject who will influence an object. So this is not about subject-object relationship. There's no others here, no opinion of others here, that we are being influenced by that and not having any courage to follow our convictions. This may sound good in some other passage, but this is not a message from this passage. And after all these eliminations, we have option D, and option D is true, correct. In our lives, having too few choices may not be a good thing, but having too many can be equally as difficult. Exactly. Towards the end, we can read that and we can be convinced option D is the message this passage is giving. Let's read this to answer question 62. Question 62. Regarding the financialization of household savings, which of the following statements best reflect the solutions that are implied by the passage? This question is very specific on solutions implied by the passage regarding the financialization of household savings. While reading this passage, I could see there are a few problems mentioned here. Let me see what are those solutions, very specifically regarding financialization of household savings. Statement 1. A flexible environment is needed to develop solutions. Is that a solution? I'll say certainly yes. Hurdles or the problems to change include onerous bureaucracy. Onerous bureaucracy would mean adamant, rigid, strict bureaucracy. So that has to change. For that, we need a flexible environment. So we can easily connect this as a solution to the problem. Once when there is onerous bureaucracy, to solve that, we need to have a flexible environment to develop these solutions that can be taken. Statement 2, households need customized solutions. Customized solutions, that's clearly mentioned at this part of the passage. A lack of basic information about which of the myriad services and providers is best for each family, customized, and how one can make the transition between them if necessary. So it has to be customized. So households needs customized solutions, best for each family. What is best for each family? So that is also mentioned here as a solution, if we can take it. Statement 3, innovations in financial technology are required. Now, this is a trap. Now, many would tend to take statement 3 as a solution and would go for D, but our answer is option A because statement 3 cannot be taken. If we can read this again, a skepticism of organized financial institutions is the hurdle. That doesn't mean that this passage is telling us we need to have innovations in financial technology. Innovations in financial technology is totally beyond the scope of what is mentioned in the passage. The passage mentions about a skepticism of organized financial institutions. But that doesn't mean that the passage is telling us that we need to have innovations in financial technology, and that is necessary as mentioned here as are required. So option A is our answer. We can't take statement 3. Take your time and read this passage to answer question 63. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Now we are told to assume what we can based on this passage. They have given us 4 statements. Patent protection given to patentees puts a huge burden on public's purchasing power in accessing patented medicines. Huge burden may sound extreme, but that is okay because the key word here is assumption. If you can read the entire passage in its entirety, it's all about price, monopoly, unaffordable to public, higher prices comes at a cost, high price for the medicine during the currency of the patent, and towards the end, to get returns on the cost incurred in innovation and research. It's all about pricing, something that is unaffordable to the public. So statement 1 is something that can be assumed from this passage. Statement 2, dependence on other countries for pharmaceutical product is huge burden for developing and poor countries. There's nothing about other countries mentioned here, and there's nothing regarding dependence on other countries. So this is an easy elimination. Once when statement 2 is eliminated, we can easily eliminate option D because this contains statement 2. We can easily eliminate option A, which contains statement 2. So that's easily eliminated. Look at statement 3. Providing medicines to the public at affordable prices is a key goal during the public health policy design in many countries. Many countries, Not at all mentioned here. And providing medicines to the public at affordable prices. Providing medicine at affordable prices is a key goal. It's too extreme. It is not at all mentioned here. It's totally beyond the context of the passage. Providing affordable medicine at affordable prices being the key goal. This is to be easily eliminated. When 3 is eliminated, option C is eliminated, and option B is the answer. We don't need to read 4, but then we have to read 4 now. Governments need to find an appropriate balance between the rights of patentees and the requirement of the patients. That can be assumed from this passage. Even if you don't like assuming that from the passage, option B is your answer, because A, C, and D can be easily discarded. I hope that's clear. This is working based on the principle of elimination. And if you can read the passage again, you can know that 1 and 4, these two statements, statement 1 and statement 4, can be assumed from the passage. I hope that is clear. Let's read this passage to answer question 64. This passage is a very interesting passage, very much thought-provoking. Question 64. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. The keyword here is assumption. Can we assume from this passage these two statements? Let's see. Statement 1. Protection of privacy is not just a right, but it has value to the economy. Protection of privacy is having some value to the economy. Can we assume that from this passage? I'll say certainly we can. India should ensure that the growth of digital economy while keeping personal data of citizens secure and protected. No one will innovate in a surveillance-oriented environment. No one will innovate in a surveillance-oriented environment or in a place where an individual's personal information is compromised. What does this mean? If an individual needs to innovate, an individual needs to have his or her privacy protected. And if there is privacy protected, there will be innovation, and this innovation will result in growth. And yes, this is certainly a value to the economy. That economy will grow when there is protection of privacy. That's the connect. So this can be taken. Statement 1 can be assumed. Statement 2, there is a fundamental link between privacy and innovation. Certainly there is. This passage is all about telling us that there is this fundamental link between privacy and innovation. And towards the end, if we can read this, therefore, data protection laws should enable the right kind of innovation, one that is user-centric and privacy protective. That's the connect, a beautiful connect. And both these statements can be assumed from this passage. So my answer will be option C. Question 71, please read this passage. Which one of the following statements most likely reflects as to what the author of the passage intends to say? Most likely reflects what the author of the passage intends. What is the author's intention? So we have to pick author's intention from these options. Option A, enrollment on schools and colleges is high, but there is no quality education. I read this passage. I could never feel that author intends to tell this. That's an easy elimination. No quality education, that's never mentioned here. Option B, unemployment must be seen as a function of rising education and aspirations of young Indians. Now, these are the key words that is mentioned: young Indians, aspirations, they're all mentioned here. So this looks like my answer, but let me wait. Option C, there are no labor-intensive industries to accommodate the huge number of unemployed people. Now, this is totally outside the context. The author never intended this. It'll be very sad, very bad if you take option C as the intention of the author. Labor intensive, totally outside the passage. Option D, the education system should be properly designed, okay, so as to enable educated people to be self-employed. Now, it is not about the flaw of education system. This passage never talks about any flaw or any issue or problem related to the education system. So this is also totally beyond the scope of the passage, not what the author intends to say. And option B is my answer, and rightly so. The younger Indians who face higher employment challenges and exhibit greater willingness to wait for the right job than their older peers. Unemployment must be seen as a function of rising education, and now this part is aspirations of young Indians, as I can connect this as aspirations of young Indians, and towards the end, rising education levels inflate unemployment challenges. Unemployment must be seen as function of rising education. Very clearly mentioned in this passage. So option B is my answer. Please read this passage. Question number 72, a very important question. Well, these options may look very complicated, but let me tell you, such complicated options, it's very easy to eliminate if you understand the essence of the passage. Options may look complicated, but let me remind you, very easy to eliminate. Okay, question 72. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most rational, logical, and practical message conveyed by the passage? The keyword here is message conveyed by the passage. Option A, modern statesmen need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking to enable them to have better perspective of their roles, responsibilities, and goals. That sounds like a message, but let me read option B. Let me see if there's something that I can eliminate. Option B. It is not desirable to have governments managed by empirical statesmen unless well mixed with others who are grounded in learning and reflect wisdom. Option B is telling that there need to be a mix of two kinds of people. They need to be mixed. And unless that is not done, it is not desirable to have governments properly function properly. One kind who are empirical in their thoughts, other learned and reflecting wisdom. This passage is never about mixing these two kinds of people. And that is never a message from this passage. Option B is an easy elimination. It is not desirable to have governments. Governments, this extreme, managed by empirical statement unless well mixed with others. It's not about calling for mixing two kinds of people together for a desired effect. It is not that. Option B is an easy elimination. Option C, as the statesmen, bureaucrats are the products of society. Products of society. Where does this come from? Not from this passage. And this very reason, I'm going to eliminate option C. Products of society. It's too extreme and beyond the scope of the passage. It is desirable to have a system of education society that focuses on training its citizens, training its citizens. It's outside the premise of this passage in scientific method and philosophical thinking from a very early age. This is also outside the premise of the passage. Option D, it is desirable that all scientists need to be philosophers as well as to make their work goal-oriented and thus purposeful and useful to society. Now, as though this passage is giving this message that every single scientist in this world need to be philosophers. Wow, that is not a message given by this passage for sure. Option A is my answer, and rightly so. Why would option A would be my answer? Modern statesmen. This passage talks about politics, politicians. Modern statesmen need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking to enable them to have better perspective of their roles and responsibilities and goals. Look at these keywords here. Goal. The keyword is used again and again and has not been rightly placed. What science need is philosophy. And this is connected to the next portion of the latter half of the passage. Government, now talking about statesmen, politicians, politics, suffers precisely like science for lack of philosophy. So there's a suffering because of lack of philosophy. That is why there is this need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking because there's some lack. Philosophy based to science, the same relation with statesmanship against use, and towards the end you can read, when divorced from actual needs of men and life, so the pursuit of politics becomes a destructive bedlam when divorced from science and philosophy. So that is why there is this need to be trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking to enable them to have better perspectives of their roles and goals. So this is a message the author would want to give us through this passage. So option A is my answer. Read this passage to answer question 73. Question 73, the last question from CSAT 2023, comprehension. Now this passage, sweet, small, short, thought-provoking, certainly a passage to reckon with. Let's discuss. Question 73. Based on the above passage, which one of the following terms best expresses the ultimate goal of the state? The ultimate goal of the state. Personal safety. Let me eliminate this. Now, there's something mentioned here regarding it is to enable their bodies and their minds to function safely. That's it. But this is not about the personal safety. That's not the ultimate goal of the state. Easily eliminated. Health of body and mind. That is also easily eliminated. Now, these two options are easily eliminated because ultimate goal of the state is not health of body and mind or personal safety. If I've read this, I know that this passage is much beyond all that. And it is not communal harmony. How can that be communal harmony? Because let's understand that this passage is having subject-object relationship, and this passage is actually primarily focusing on the subject. What the subject will receive, that is liberty, freedom. Free each man from fear. The end of the state, I repeat, the author is asserting, is not to make rational beings into brute beasts and machines. It is to enable their bodies and their minds to function safely. It is to lead men to live by and to exercise a free reason. So it's the ultimate focus is on the subject. Liberty of each and every individual is the focus of the passage. So the focus is on the subject and not on the object. Communal harmony will involve a society in which a person interacts. But the society is not the focus here. The focus is here the person who will be free. And because of that free reason, this person may not waste his or her strength in hatred, anger, and guile. And maybe that is the reason why we may think it's communal harmony, but the focus is on the subject and focus on liberty. So D is the answer. I hope that's clear. Read this passage to answer question 73. Question 73, the last question from CSAT 2023, Comprehension. Now this passage, sweet, small, short, thought-provoking, certainly a passage to reckon with. Let's discuss. Question 73. Based on the above passage, which one of the following terms best expresses the ultimate goal of the state? The ultimate goal of the state. Personal safety. Let me eliminate this. Now, there's something mentioned here regarding it is to enable their bodies and their minds to function safely. That's it. But this is not about the personal safety. That's not the ultimate goal of the state. Easily eliminated. Health of body and mind. That is also easily eliminated. Now, these two options are easily eliminated because ultimate goal of the state is not health of body and mind or personal safety. If I've read this, I know that this passage is much beyond all that. And it is not communal harmony. How can that be communal harmony? Because let's understand that this passage is having subject-object relationship, and this passage is actually primarily focusing on the subject. What the subject will receive, that is liberty, freedom. Free each man from fear. The end of the state, I repeat, the author is asserting, is not to make rational beings into brute beasts and machines. It is to enable their bodies and their minds to function safely. It is to lead men to live by and to exercise a free reason. So it's the ultimate focus is on the subject. Liberty of each and every individual is the focus of the passage. So the focus is on the subject and not on the object. Communal harmony will involve a society in which a person interacts. But the society is not the focus here. The focus is here the person who will be free. And because of that free reason, this person may not waste his or her strength in hatred, anger, and guile. And maybe that is the reason why we may think it's communal harmony, but the focus is on the subject and focus on liberty. So D is the answer. I hope that's clear.